Now, I'd like to now introduce a man who has extensive experience on this issue, and we're delighted to be able to have him with us today. Attorney Robert Berg has taken on some pretty big and powerful forces on this issue. And let me say that we will answer all the questions that we can on our website, and we will address many of them after we finish these presentations this morning. But I want to encourage you to please write to info@ehtrust.org if you have additional materials after this Zoom webinar is over, or additional questions you want to raise for us. And please do look for all of the interviews with Professor Hugh Taylor, with Mr. Ed Myers, and others that we have taped here today, so that you'll have the capacity to look at the record. We do not know what the FCC will do, but we do know we have a new FCC and they have an opportunity for a fresh start, and we encourage them to take it. We think that congressional hearings, of course, are long overdue, but in the meantime, as Professor Taylor said, the public should not wait for the regulatory agencies to act. They are way behind the times, and people need to take sensible steps to protect their children, follow the advice of the American Academy of Pediatrics, follow the advice of Professor Taylor, and look on our website at ehtrust.org for practical information about what you can do now to protect yourselves and your families. Mr. Berg, we look forward to your comments. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Robert Berg. I'm a lawyer in New York. I've been practicing law for 38 years, and I specialize in class action litigation. For the past few years, thanks to the influence of my daughter, Zoe Berg, and her work with Americans for Responsible Technology, I've devoted a tremendous amount of my time in my legal practice to helping individuals and groups fight the deployment of wireless facilities in their communities. That's how I met the incomparable and inspirational team of Deborah and Theodora. I'm honored that Deborah and Theodora have asked me to speak today about the EHT's tremendous landmark victory with the DC Circuit ruling in EHT versus FCC. Now, I had nothing to do with this appeal, so my comments are as an admiring outsider. This case truly has pitted the Davids against the Goliaths. It's exceptionally gratifying that the second most important court in the country has bench slapped the Federal Communications Commission hard and exposed what we've always known, that the emperor, the FCC, especially led by former Chairman Ajit Pai, has no clothes. The language that the majority uses is remarkably hard-hitting. It's very unusual for a court of appeals, when dealing with a federal agency, to be so aggressive in its language, saying an agency acted so arbitrarily, capriciously, did not use any reasoning. I mean, it's really unheard of. It's tremendously gratifying to read that language. Now, we had a sense of that during the oral argument in January, when the panel was questioning the lawyers, but to see it in writing is just terrific. And I'm really so happy that these organizations fought so hard. It's so hard to get groups to actually appeal this. I mean, because you're going against the best funded companies, the telecoms in the world, the government, with the FCC has been such a captured industry for so long, and to actually get a victory like this is stunning. It really is a landmark event. Now, the FCC, its bar in this case was very, very low to win. It just had to show that it engaged in some reasonable decision-making, and it was unable to win on the areas non-cancer related. Now, let me talk briefly about the one area that's been disappointing. It's not really surprising given the legal standard the court was required to apply, and that's the portion of the opinion regarding wireless radiation and cancer. Now, the petitioners argued that the FCC failed to respond to record evidence that exposure to RF radiation at levels below the Commission's current limits may cause cancer. So the petitioners pointed to the IARC classification of RF radiation as possibly carcinogenic to humans, and to the 2013 monograph, where the IARC found limited evidence that RF radiation causes cancer in humans and animals. to the 2018 National Toxicology Program study and to the Ramazzini Institute study that both found increases in incidence in cancers in rats and mice exposed to RF radiation. Now that to us is very compelling evidence. I mean, it's tremendously compelling. But the court found that the commission's failure to mention the IARC monograph did not epitomize reasoned decision-making. So that was good. But then the court held that the commission's order provided a reasoned response to the NTP and Ramazzini Institute studies. The court said that the commission explained that the NTP study can't be extrapolated to humans because the rats and mice received RF radiation across their whole bodies. The exposure levels were higher than what people receive under the current rules. The duration of exposure was longer than what people received. The studies were based on 2G and 3G phones, not Wi-Fi and 5G. And the order cites a critical response to those studies from ICNRP. So all the court said was they provided reasons. They engaged in a process of reasoned decision-making. We don't agree with that. We think they're wrong, but they engaged in a reasoned, rational process. The bottom line is that the Court of Appeals is not adopting those findings as correct by the FCC. It's just saying they engaged in a reasonable process, and under the law, as long as they do so, the court reviewing an agency's determination has to give a lot of deference to the agency. And so they passed that very, very low hurdle. So while that's disappointing, it is to be expected under the law. The court makes clear in its opinion, we take no position in the scientific debate regarding the health and the environmental effects of RF radiation. So that leaves the door open in the future, certainly with respect to RF radiation and cancer, to challenging the emissions levels again. We think obviously the evidence is compelling and gets compelling, more and more compelling every day as new studies flow in, that cancer is caused by wireless radiation. So I'm very hopeful. We have a new administration in town, thank God. We have new commissioners on the FCC. We have an ability to seek congressional hearings. There's a whole new playing field here. And this decision really opens the door. It allows us, when we go to court around the country, to say, look, the FCC has these standards, but they're not gold standards. They're actually terrible standards. The Court of Appeals, the second most important court in the country, has really said these are really, they acted very badly. These are old standards. They have to be looked at again. And it really calls them into question. Now, the standards stay in effect until the FCC concludes its remand proceedings, but they're certainly not inviolate as they were before this decision. So again, I want to congratulate EHT for its efforts. They're amazing. The work they do is amazing, and I'm really happy to be able to speak here today. Thank you.
And we're delighted to have you because you've had the experience of settling what was one of the largest consumer class action suits in New Jersey history against AT&T for consumer fraud. And many people have asked the question, which we cannot answer here today, as to whether these standards at this time could be considered fraud in and of themselves. That is a question that we will leave to you, Mr. Berg, and other attorneys to consider as we move ahead on this issue.